Tami, welcome to the show. It's lovely to be speaking with you. How are you?
I'm doing great today. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So, I want to kick off with you with a question that I always open these conversations with. And that's, what do you think or feel or sense from your vantage point is going on in the global human psyche right now? We're in January 2024 as we record. So, yeah.
It's so amazing to be able to have this conversation right at the beginning of the year because you get the opportunity to reflect on what you've been through. And
Yeah.
I do think that what's going on right now is people are a little rattled, still a little unsettled. And it's still been sort of a degree of some unprecedented times in recent decades. And I think some of the causes of this, we still are underestimating the aftershock of COVID.
Totally.
And there's still public health fears that are out there. There's new ways of working. And while some of them have been quite successful, some of them haven't. And I think companies have been a little bit maybe back and forth on what they want to do about, do you work in an office? Do you not work in an office? Is it hybrid? Is it everybody returning back to work, which is causing a lot of uncertainty? I think the markets continue to be very unsettling, and we really have, I think, for the first time in a long time, have seen this downturn continue, or at least there be uncertainty of when it will rebound. You've seen layoffs, you've seen cost-cutting measures, you've seen a lot of people rethinking their headcount and their size and scale. And then if you're looking at the broader world, you have the issues with bipartisan politics, highly dysfunctional. And it's not just in the US, it's around the world. And then I'll add this, the most critical thing I think that's been happening is this is the first time in a long time between the Ukraine war and now the war in Israel that it's just causing a lot of division in how people think about what's going on in these efforts. So all this to say is that there's a lot of uncertainty. I think people are looking for stability in a time of great instability, and balancing the prevalence of technology, AI, optimism for the future, anxiety, whether or not I'll have a job, my spouse will have a job, whether I'm going to be sick, my family's going to be sick, who's going to get into office, who's not going to get into office. It's just leaving people with a lot of uncertainty. And a wise mentor once said to me that during these downturns or during these moments of dislocation, they always feel so long. And when you're in it, it feels like everything, it'll never come out of it and it'll never change. And the funny part about it is the second you're out of it, it was almost like a blip. So if you can actually ground yourself during these times and find ways to actually embrace the change, embrace the uncertainty, when things change, you'll be really set up for good success.
That's
may sound counterintuitive.
No, it's such a wonderful way to open this conversation. And I think before we move into some of the other questions I'd planned, I'd love to ask, how do you find your grounding? Because you're right, there is, and it's not like what you've described. There are so many aspects of life that are wobbling right now. And that's just in the comfortable end of the spectrum for those of us who are in peaceful nations with access to food. Like in the best of scenarios, it's already uncertain. In the worst of scenarios, it's unthinkably hard. And so what are your practices for grounding that you turn to help you kind of navigate this until, like the mentor says, we ride the wave, or we come out of it and it feels more like a blip than an existential, stretch that seems to just continue off into the distance?
Yeah, and it's such a great question because I think I like to think about, thinking about the things I can control. And not always focusing on what you can't. And, when times like these happen, people talk about all the things that are bigger than them or things that they don't have the ability to actually make impact on. And it overwhelms you and and you lose your focus. So I try to ground to what do I take stock in? Family, friends, having a great opportunity at a great company like where I work, all those things that I have that I can hold as my own and ground those for it. And then think about the things that I'm uncertain about, where within that can I make impact or control? And at the end of it, it's really just, I'm someone I'm probably different than many. I embrace change. I see change
Yeah.
is the constant. So I
Yeah.
look forward to it. I'm the one who dives into the water to like go to the new thing. So for me, these kind of times are where I find the most opportunities and the most interesting challenges to solve. So I say to people, don't look at this time as a negative or it's not going to work for you. Look at what you can do and what can work for you.
Great. So, thinking about the challenges and that constant of embracing change, which is a wonderful approach, and it's also making me think of the interview I had with Katerina with Spotify. This kind of this embracing of the possibility of what's yet to come. It's kind of this forward-looking stance. What do you see as some of the pressing challenges that we're facing now, and how we might begin to meet them or embrace them, or perhaps even turn them to our advantage, to the flourishing of all?
So from my vantage, yeah, it's such a big question, but from my
Yeah.
vantage point, I would say, and sitting in the seat I am as like a people leader, I think the challenges are really around trying to figure out what is your mission, what are you driving towards, do you have specific goals, and really focus it there. And I think one of the things individually people can do is really think about learning as sort of the way to ground you, because the challenges that you face, you could only answer those challenges or meet those challenges if you're able to look at things that you've learned in the past and how you're acquiring those skills and knowledge, and then how you're actually applying them to new situations. So while these challenges that I've mentioned earlier are out there and companies are still looking to grow in markets that are kind of flattish, and really with employees looking to grow their careers when maybe there isn't growth at the company, the only thing you can do is prepare. And the preparation comes from you being introspective and thinking about learning. And I think that's the key unlock, frankly. And if I look at what we've done at my company, Pagaya, we center around the culture of learning. And we do this in so many different ways, but we've instituted this new way of thinking called the continuous learning cycle. And we kind of threw out reviews, and we said reviews are backward looking, do not focus on people's growth. They're about how you get paid or promoted, or potentially how you get managed out of a company, right? But they're not about how you actually grow and learn. So we threw that out and said, wait, let's talk about learning. If you're in a learning culture, you can get after any challenge, right? If you're always introspective, you're understanding where you're succeeding, where you're failing, and then you're able to actually take those learnings and apply them to that next big challenge that comes your way. And this process of the continuous learning cycle has been a great outcome for our company, because it's now bleeding into how we work in general. So not only are we doing this twice a year in a more formal way, but it's now coming out where people are, after something that succeeds or something that fails, we sit back and we say, what did we learn from it? How can we do it better? What worked? What didn't work?
It's interesting because hearing you talk about that, you're also talking about an approach which then has an impact on the culture and also people's individual lives as well. And so obviously, I mean, through the course of our conversation, we'll be looking at AI, but we're also talking about the transformation of business and how people show up at work, how businesses and people in leadership positions like yourself can help, I guess, steward culture change and the ways in which we show up to learn more when we might be in a more contracted state with all the uncertainty that's happening. And a couple of the things that kind of pinged in my mind as you were describing this continuous learning circle is Dweck's idea of intelligence being something that can be expanded upon, like a muscle that you can grow, and the sense of grit as well, that you can cultivate environments in which you're enabling people to step into their potential. And of course, that's so much easier when you have a culture where that kind of behavior is encouraged.
Yes.
And so I don't know if you have any thoughts you want to add to that before I move into the next question, because you're nodding and smiling.
Yeah, I think what you're talking about is teaching resilience, and that comes from learning. And in most cases, I think we've kind of diverged from what learning really is. We've spent more time acquiring skills, knowledge, and experiences, but not applying them. And that's very much what most people learn when they go to school. And when you come into the work environment, it's not just about getting those experiences and skills. It's how you take those and then apply them to a new solution. And that teaches resilience, because you're going to fall down on your face. You're going to make mistakes. And if those mistakes are not welcomed in the sense of you can learn from them, you're going to then hide those. And that's going to stop your learning. And it's going to impede you from growing. And you have to look at it like every opportunity is to see where I succeeded and why. And most people don't know why they actually
That's
succeeded.
a really good point.
They don't. Sometimes it's luck, timing, whatever. Maybe it's a combination of the people you're working with. And so knowing that helps, but also knowing why you fell on your face and really being open to exploring it. And I think in most companies, that's like a taboo, because if you're sharing where you really fell on your face, there's consequences that people might feel could happen as a result of the way it's interpreted, whether you get tagged in a review as not performing or not meeting expectations because of that one foot fault or error. Whereas in the culture that we built at Pagaya, it's really about taking those learnings and seeing that growth, and feeling comfortable to have those conversations in a way that really is about your development.
It's that psychological safety that Amy C. Edmondson has researched and foregrounded for people. It's what happens in environments where you do have the capacity to show up, ask questions, make mistakes, challenge. And so we've mentioned Pagaya a couple of times, but let's briefly talk about what it is as an AI network. And then from that perspective, I would love to hear your take on what you're seeing as AI's biggest impacts on organizations. So like to look at the people lens, and then perhaps your own personal sense of what's coming up on the horizon, because shit is going down. There's a lot happening right now. So what Pagaya is, big influences on AI in the workplace, and then other personal things that you see on the horizon that you're interested or perhaps kind of thinking about.
Great. So let me start with what Pagaya is. So Pagaya is a B2B2C financial technology company. And we were founded on a mission to make financial opportunities more accessible to more people. And we did this by innovating traditional underwriting systems and leveraging AI capabilities and data. So how does it work? And it's always good to give an example. Pagaya has over 25 partners right now. And our partners are typical lenders, either banks or digital lenders. And when a customer approaches or walks into one of those lenders to ask for a loan, whether it be a personal loan, an auto loan, a buy now, pay later marketplace, goes into a dealership, whatever it may be, the lender, for some reason, usually through credit history, scores related, et cetera, will turn that customer down for one reason or another. And Pagaya, behind the scenes, gets all that same information. We run it through our AI network, and we take that data and from all the partners that we're getting, which helps us to understand total consumer behavior, and we're likely to then approve that customer. And behind the scenes, so that customer now gets that loan priced accordingly. They think it's coming from their lender of choice, and that now that partner or the lender now has a new customer. And because of our unique upfront funding model, the institutional investors that fund those loans get access to a unique set of investor assets. So it's like a win-win-win for all. And if you think about it, since inception, with these 25 plus partners over 7+ years, we have seen over 1 trillion loan applications. And that just continues to enhance and build on our AI models to get better and better at adding that value creation, not only for our partners and investors and eventually the end consumers. So what I see Pagaya doing is enabling people who are going after some sort of credit that they need to get the car loan, the car in the garage, to get the home they want to rent, to get the loan they need to buy groceries or do whatever they need. And that's enabling them to have the life that they expect to have, and then to build that credit alongside it in the right way.
Do you know what? Because I've recently just gone for a mortgage application in Spain. And because I'm quite a complex case, because, I basically work, I have my own company, but I'm sole director, so not sole employee. And then, I fly around and give talks, mostly in the UK. It's a complex situation. I've been trying to do it through like these platforms, these really basic platforms. And in the end, it was actually the opposite end. I ended up having to go to the local bank, and they looked at everything. They're like, right, we're going to have to do this ourselves to get and mountains of documents. And I was thinking, it's that classic computer says no thing, which is where the structure itself is so badly organized. It's a legacy infrastructure, let's say, that it cannot handle complexity. And so, what we
Yeah.
really need at its best is a system that can compute complexity, that then is able to spit out some great options. I did finally get it from the hard work of two amazing individuals. But so it sounds like actually something which enables people that otherwise would be shut out. In the best case
100%.
scenarios, it's, yeah.
100%. And I'll go further than to say that as a result of the work that Pagaya has been doing, we're seeing that our financial inclusion is greater than what the banks are seeing. And that's enabling people that maybe went for 4 different types of loan, got turned down for 3, now to get the loan they want for the thing they need, and then to continue to build their credit so that they can get the loan the next time on their own.
Amazing. So, and that's like a positive spin and story on what AI can do when it's done, oriented towards a beneficial outcome for multiple partners. What are some of the challenges that you see in the world of AI and work, or AI and finance, actually, as that's kind of also within this territory? What are some of the challenges or pitfalls that you see coming up, or perhaps already here?
Yeah, I think AI can't be the end all be all. And I think there's a sense that it's everything. And it's funny because I thought, why don't I ask ChatGPT this question? And it was interesting to say, like, well, what would be the difference between the computer deciding or the human, and what's so unique and what aspects of humanity makes us different. And it was funny because it actually mirrored the answer I would have given. And so when you think about the pitfalls, I'm such an optimist, so I'm always talking about the positive, but the pitfalls are that you lose that human element of creativity, of ethics, of that gut feel. You lose that the ability to navigate something that's complex, like the loan application you just went through. Like you couldn't have AI just do it for you because it would have spit out the wrong outcome, right? But there's different ways in which humans can add to that. So I think the challenges right now of what's not working is we're not figuring out how to incorporate the human element with the AI element. Because I think together that's the power. And let's all remember that the AI is built upon all the things that humans have put into the system. So we're flawed from the beginning. We have biases. All of that's in there. And we have to remember that. So while we want AI to help us be more unbiased, we have to remember it's built on already biased data. So some of this has to have a little bit of that gut feel, using ethics, the creativity that humans bring, the emotional intelligence, all of that has to be kind of overlaid in order for it to be something valuable.
So there's that kind of piece of it being a mirror. It's like a binary. I'm thinking of the Matrix here, when it sort of shifts into the ones and zeros in green, and then you see. But it's like that. It's like a digital mirror that then amplifies certain traits that we have. But then also there is that opportunity to really reckon with our collective tendencies and choose differently and code in with intent from inception a different set of parameters that lead to different results. So you talked about the ethical side. Do you think we can optimize everything with AI? Are there limits to what we can do?
I love the word optimize. Most people know me. I use that word a lot. But I have to say, no. You can't optimize everything with AI. I do think that when you think about companies, people are at the heart of those companies. And humans add that exactly what I was just saying. They add that gut feel, that ability for creativity to pivot when something is a challenge and to use that learning that they've had and then use it differently. So I think that's where I think about the humanity side of it. And I think AI will help underpin and make it easier and streamline and synthesize a lot of the data that anyone can have. And then the humans on top of that can really add the value and really the synthesis of that to really what is the situation you have, and really be able to apply in different ways and pivot if things happen, at the last minute or change, or some of the data sets change.
Yeah, I mean, It's so tricky. I've been having conversations with a dear friend of mine. We meet every Tuesday for coffee in the mornings. He's an artist, but he's also got a background in coding. He's a developer. And he's been training his AI bot using Stable Diffusion to create what look like paintings, which are of late 19th century artists, combination of a particular set
Wow.
of artists that I really like Casas and Lautrec and these sorts of folks, to create these extraordinarily beautiful images that, okay, apart from the hands, because AI is still having a real problem with like, getting the digits and the structure. But apart from the hands, they are so convincing and they actually move me. And this is for me always the question, what is good art or the arts? It's something that moves me. And this art moves me. And of course, it's a collaboration between my friend who's the artist who has the vision, the artist that came before upon which the information is trained or the data is trained. But there is this question of what are the things that you think AI is going to be able to produce? Does it touch upon creativity and human ingenuity and imagination? If we're thinking about a time horizon where, this is something I was thinking about for a talk that I'm giving around reclaiming our humanity in an age of automation, this time horizon looking back where AI is looking at historical behavioral data and contextual data, humans are looking forward towards the emergent edge, dreaming into the future. And Tracy Follows, who's an amazing futurist who I'm going to interview, talks about this. She was kind of giving me some ideas around this the other day. Thinking about this orientation, do you think there will come a time, and if so, when AI kind of turns its metaphorical head and sights and starts to dream into the future possibilities that we might not come up with by ourselves or in tandem with AI?
I think I'd be silly to say no.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's
Because
kind of, I know it's not here yet, but
because after that lead up of that, what you've just said, you know, I think you can never be fearful of what the future will bring, and and that will offer opportunities in different ways. So I don't say no, and I'm not scared by it, because I always feel like there's a human element to everything that you do. And you're right, there's a taste function here as you're looking at the art that's being produced by AI. And for you, that works. That's your taste function. And it may not work for others, right? And so they'll need other things. So some people will love the AI art, and some people will still want the more traditional art. And you see it now where, like, we have digital music everywhere. Well, why is there a resurgence of vinyl and a resurgence of people using old record players, right? Because the sound is different, and that imperfectness is nice, right? And that actually lends to it. So I've seen AI. I know someone does AI for music, and she produced a lot of music. And I have to say, on first instinct, you're like, I love this. Well, of course you love it, because it's all the notes and things you already know put together in a way that's going to fit to you. But there's always going to be an artist that's going to come out and say, wait, I have a new sound, and I have a new way of putting those chords together that even a computer couldn't figure out. So I'm not fearful of it. I would never say no, but I think it's an opportunity to realize that we have so many different taste functions in here, and it'll apply to different people for different things.
I love that it's taste functions. I'm like, oh, that's a great little term for that. So thinking then about collaboration with AI and there always being a role for humans, even as that role emerges and evolves. One of the core themes that I like to return to, especially in recent seasons, is what flourishing means to us in a time of acceleration and disruption, ecological change, economic change. I mean, it feels like this year in particular being a big election year all around the world, and with AI laws only just starting to try to catch up, and with unexpected weather patterns, there's so much change that it can be very easy to get lost in the sensation of overwhelm. So given all of that, what does flourishing in this moment in time mean to you?
Wow, flourishing in this time. I think it's really, from an individual perspective, you have to look at what your North Star is and what you care about. And through that, where you're motivated, what you like, what you dislike, you're going to flourish based on those passions. And I think a lot of us can't flourish because we're so focused on what we don't know, we haven't acquired, or we didn't do, versus what we can do, what we can believe, and where we can go. And
Yeah.
and so I think flourishing in these kind of times is really taking back what I said earlier, control as to those things, having a direction like a North Star, and then really focusing on learning. I mean, I'm a constant learner. I thrive on it. Now, to be honest, learning's not easy. And when I think about flourishing and learning, when I look back on this last year, I had more, face plants, I would say,
Yeah.
than ever. And
Oh,
that's been great because my worst experiences are my best learnings, which means I could flourish in the future with new tools and better ways of doing things. So maybe I didn't answer that question well, but as I think about it, you can only flourish by taking control and embracing that change. Change is
yeah.
good. Change
Yeah.
offers opportunity and possibilities.
Yeah. I love that. I think learning is going to be a key theme to this, and this sort of kind of especially when you're going through it, to remember it. That's the thing, isn't it? It's like you're going through the face plant, and all you can think of is, oh my god, my face, it hurts, and the shame, and whatever else is going on. But actually, when you come through it, you come through with something more than when you went in. So, thinking about generative AI, automation, you've already we've spoken to a little bit with the business side of things, how AI, in its best sense, can actually generate positive outcomes dealing with very complex situations to enable people. And I don't think this is true just in finance. I think it's true in lots of different areas.
Yeah.
But we're also seeing, last week there was a stat that came out in the States that something like 4 in 10 jobs on average in the industries that exist currently will be disappeared due to AI within the next, I don't know how long the time frame was, within the next year or a couple of years. What's your take on that? Because there's always been, it seems to me, these kind of waves of fear. If you look historically back to that time horizon, the industries of factories are going to take our jobs, or automation through the printing, whatever it might be. And yet it feels to me that AI is of an order of magnitude much vaster than what we've previously experienced, especially because it links the whole world up. And so there's there's an extra edge to this, which there's a chap called Paddy LaFluffy, who I interviewed a while back, who talks about this being the first time that we can have some sort of planetary consciousness through this interweaved, I don't know. Anyway, so that's kind of like taking it into a more existential realm, which I think is fascinating. But what are your thoughts around that before I go down too many rabbit holes?
Well, I think it all comes down to adaptability. Like similar to what I just said before about embracing change, but you also have to develop sort of a more diverse skill set of things.
Okay.
And I think that a lot of people are very comfortable with what they're doing now and how they're doing it, and looking at a career as a ladder, not as a journey, and seeing what the next steps they're going to take and just build that next skill to get to that next level. But I would recommend and ask people to really think about, finding more of an adaptable approach to your career and journey, and thinking more about the different things you can acquire to learn across those different things that allow you to be ready when that next thing comes. So if those jobs go away that you were doing before, let's say you're doing payroll, and now payroll no longer is something that you're going to be doing, and they could do that more automated. Well, think about how you could then take the data on that and apply it to more quantitative or other types of trending analysis or something. And so thinking about those transferable skills, and not just the skills you have today, but find the ways to learn different things so that you have adaptability and a diverse skill set that can be applied in different ways. But I think most people constantly look at what does it take to get to the next level, to get into that corner office, to have a management team, whatever it may be. I'd say those are important, but shouldn't be your primary focus. Your primary focus is developing a very diverse skill set. And early on in my own career, I did that. I did all the things people didn't want to do. And then there came a time where they needed somebody to do this new and improved kind of role. And I was the only one who had sort of the experiences that would lend to it. So I use that as an example that you could even do that now. I'll add one last thing to it is take some risk. Uncertainty is good. People convince themselves that it's not, and it's something they shouldn't do. And they spend a whole amount of time in their mind, like going in imaginations of why it would work and why it wouldn't work. Think about why you can do it and why it would be great for you versus why it wouldn't be, and take some risk.
You'd make a great mentor. Because I'm sitting here as you're thinking, I'm like, this is really good advice. I could apply this to myself. And also thinking that, when it's scary to take these risks, because it can be, like, there's certain projects I'm working on at the moment, which I feel like I could have progressed further on if I just jumped. And it's this kind of, there is this, yes, take the leap. And again, this comes back to one of the things you mentioned earlier, being in a culture in which that becomes normalized, so that then the thrust, the motivation or the energy required to take that leap and to try something new is supported by the people around you, because then it becomes easier. It definitely becomes easier. So thinking about companies, and I kind of want to go down the sort of keeping with this business theme, what are some of the biggest mistakes, do you think, that tech companies in particular perhaps are making when it comes to business longevity, especially now when so many businesses are tightening their purse strings?
Yes, I think you're right. It's there are a ton of mistakes that companies are making. I think it starts from the top piece, which is that your people strategy is your business strategy. And in most cases, you will see, if you talk to lots of CEOs and companies or look at their business plans, that the people strategy pieces are not even in their top five.
Yeah.
And it's kind of staggering, because people make companies. They are the heart of your company. And you can't just be focused on your product or service and expect that that's going to work for you. So I think one of the biggest mistakes is not recognizing that people strategy is your business strategy and incorporating that into everything that you do. The second thing I think that companies make mistakes on is that they're so focused on what their outcome is, that they're also not thinking about the culture that's going to get them there, and really doubling down on those norms, those values, those behaviors that are really going to drive the outcome. There's a lot of spinning that happens because decision making in companies is not clearly stated or said, here's our process for doing it. Are you a consensus organization? Are you a consultative decision making? Are you a one person decision making process? What are you? And tell people so that everyone can operate in that way and make it a smoother path. That's just one example. But you could also say, like, we're a debate culture. Well, if you're a debate culture, what does debate look like? We don't spend the time really articulating those elements of the culture and how you can be successful in it in order to be able to achieve the mission and the goals you have for the company. So I think mistakes that I would say is not really doubling down on your culture and realizing that your people strategy is your business strategy.
Yeah, I mean, it's not funny, but I need to find a better word for this. But like, it's extraordinary how many people, especially that I've spoken to in the last 2 weeks, so straddling the year, have talked about feeling collectively with other folks in their businesses so burnt out, and this need for cultures to include elements of rest, of revitalizing, and back to that learning thing with the growth mindset. Like, you can move towards things with greater agility and openness if you are well sourced within you, if you've got enough time to take off, or if you're supported. And so I think there's also a question there. I mean, it's a broader cultural question, right? Which is, how do we create not only business cultures, but cultures beyond the walls or virtual offices of a business that enable people to come fresh and to feel as if they have energy in the tank to bring their best ideas to work and to want to bring them. You mentioned at the top of the conversation some of the changes that we're seeing with different modes of working. In your greatest vision of like ways to work that, I mean, they may well be plural, that enable us to bring our best selves and to have that reciprocal relationship with work where we're getting something back and we're also giving our best. What are some of the features that need to be there, do you think, especially as we are going to become more related to technology and to AI as we move forward?
So as it relates to, where you work. I think we're overly obsessed by it.
We are.
And
It's everywhere.
we're just overly obsessed by the location and the places we work. And I think from the beginning, in thinking about why this happened, it was because we had fear of people, sickness and dying, right? And so we had no choice but to work remotely and more isolated. And we were put into this, not really good experiment because we didn't have a chance to A/B test it. With that said, many companies decided to rethink how they were going to work, but they were compounding that or conflating that with where. And I think they're two different things. One is the norms and the values and the ways in which you're going to do things. The other is the location and the connectivity that you're going to do it with. And you can never get away from human connection and collaboration. And you can never get away from in-person connection and collaboration. So thinking asynchronously and synchronously, both in person and also remotely. And I think what companies have neglected to do is they focused more on the where. And why you're seeing this flip-flopping with companies of bring everyone back, it's okay to be remote, whatever, back and forth, is because people didn't sit down and say, this is how we're going to work together, regardless of where we are. And these are the moments we're going to have intentional collaboration. These are the moments where we're going to have them in person intentionally. These are the moments we're going to have them not in person. And you can do all of those things, but you have to set out that plan. And I think you'll see people saying why they bring them back to the office. It's because that feels like the easiest way to get that collaboration and to get those, moments of water cooler talk or, the haphazard things that happen after a meeting. But you could find ways to do that in both ways. Now, at Pagaya, I'll say we're an in-person culture with flexibility. And I love that kind of thought process, because what works for us is we know we're a scaling, recently public company that's really driving fast to try to really continue to do more for people in the marketplace. And in order to do that, we have a lot of change happening. And convening in an office makes it a lot easier to have those happen better and faster and easier. With that said, we also want to give people the flexibility to balance their work and life. And we work both in Israel and in New York are our two locations. So Israel doesn't work on Fridays. But they work Thursday to Sunday, right? Or Sunday to Thursday, I should say. And we work Monday to Friday. So in Friday's a lot quieter because Israel's not working. Sunday is a busy day in Israel, and it's quieter because U.S. is not working. But people in the U.S. are working a little on Sunday, and they're working a little on Friday, and the same is going for Israel. So you have to have flexibility built in. And sometimes what we've learned is that having that in-person culture allows us to move a little faster, but also giving people that flexibility to work from home from time to time or to be able to take care of their personal things helps balance that out. With that said, I think what I'm seeing in the market is that there's so many people that really want that remote work or to be more flexible. And they're seeing that as no longer a privilege, but an expectation. A right. Exactly. And, I think there's times we have to figure out how we can balance the two so that it works for the company, but also works for the employees. And I see that as like what I call care for the employees, but also continuity for your business, and really thinking about how those two things can and do work hand in hand. If the company continues to do really well, that's caring for employees. And if employees are cared for, they're going to do very well for the company. And that happens whether you're in a crisis or you're in a regular day-to-day.
So interesting, because all of this, it seems, keeps coming back down to intentionality and clarity. Like you have to have the intention to really think about what is it that's going to work well? How do we build that in? And then what are the expectations that we're setting? And I think we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but I'm curious if there's something else that comes to your mind when I ask this question. How can we humanize tech when major tech companies, as we've already pointed towards, often prioritize product and service? Is there something else that we're missing that people could benefit from thinking about?
Yeah, I think it's a hard one because on the one hand, we're all brought to a company to drive that product or service strategy.
Yeah, that's why they
And
hire people.
that's why they
It's
hire
kind of,
people, right? There's a mission.
yeah,
But at the same time, without people, you don't have that product and service strategy. so,
yeah, yeah,
so you have to kind of weigh that they both are two components to the recipe that are important. And
yeah.
and I think to humanize it a little bit more is to say, you know, are you getting the most value out of your people? You said earlier in this conversation that people come to companies and they can't always do their best work. I think that's true. I think it's true because we don't set up the cultures and the environments to allow people to expose not only their expertise they have today, but the potential they have for tomorrow. And I go back to how do you humanize it? And I feel like a little bit like I'm repetitive, but it's true. If we're not in a learning culture and we're not building those systems that encourage learning at all times in a safe way, you're not going to feel that people can actually do their best work. They can achieve the goals you want them to, and they can forward that mission for your product and strategy.
Yeah. So it comes back down to that. And in a way, it's quite simple because it's an easy thing to articulate, but actually doing the legwork. Because I think so many cultures, so many companies want to say that they're doing the thing. And the evidence is completely contrary to that. Like huge amounts of burnout, mental health issues left and right. Also, you're saying about the flip-flopping of whether we want people in or not, being unclear, unarticulated expectations, which people then aren't able to grow up. So like there's a huge amount of flux. And obviously with there being so much change, different companies are going to choose different ways to operate, which previously, up until 5-6 years ago, it was only a handful of companies that would have any other kind of way of working. And, or if you're talking about like the Googles having their own campuses and such. But it's only recently that there's been such a fragmentation of the business spheres where out of 10 companies, all 10 might have quite different ways from one another of working. So there's also this kind of back to the stance of being open to new things, also knowing what's going to work better for you, I think. Is there a question that is keeping you up at night when you think about the future and AI that's something which your mind returns to time and again and you're trying to solve for? Because every time I ask people this question in various guises, something different comes up. And I know that you're a go-getter, but like just for a moment, like what
Um,
is the thing that keeps you up at night?
I guess what keeps me up at night when it comes to, you're saying technology and AI, is will people just leverage it at the most basic level, or will they really embrace it to really go further and take that risk of exploring and being uncomfortable with it and seeing what it can yield? I think when you're worried about your job or you're worried about where it's going to make you position you, you sometimes go into defense mode and then you won't leverage a tool to its fullest. And it goes back to this idea that if you can be introspective and in an environment where you feel comfortable, you can actually embrace it more and not see it as a threat, but as a solution. And as something that can empower the work you do and make you better. There's some silly little examples now, and I'm sure my husband would hate me for saying this, but like when he was doing his performance reviews, he would write out all the stuff, his performance reviews at his company. They have a traditional, they don't have the forward-looking Pagaya CLC, unfortunately, not yet. Hopefully they will. But in the current process that he had, he'd write the bullets out and then he would throw it through ChatGPT to see what they said. And that gave him more thoughts, that gave him more ideas.
Interesting.
And he enhanced his reviews to a better place as a result, and it made it more expedient for him versus him having writer's block and sitting there for a while saying, am I really making sure that I'm showing all the positives and the negatives and the supports and all that? He got ideas that helped him to frame it better and make a better outcome in it. So if you embrace it, you'll see there's opportunity and there's learning even within that because you're getting the views of so much data, not just your own.
I think part of it also is because I've been resisting the whole kind of like, and especially because I'm someone who sits at, well, the kind of the intersection between increasingly the humanities, the arts and tech and persuasive tech and how it impacts ourselves and others. I've been quite resistant to try out AI in its various guises.
I'm so surprised.
I know, me too. I surprised myself. I was like, wow, some parts of me is really not like it. And then recently I thought, sod it, I'm going to have a play. And it's actually, it gets really fun. It can be really fun. And so I was doing a deck for, a talk exploring some of these themes and thinking about the limitations and where it's really good at flexing its muscle. And so things like drawing research papers on X, Y, and Z on these specific models as it applies to behavior and social channels for these types of people. And I just went through and fully cited, so I can actually go and check. I mean, I still don't trust. I don't trust AI to not give me, hallucinations every now and again. Not me, but hallucinated answers.
It still will.
It still will. It still will. So that was interesting. But then the art it generates, and going back to that kind of, or theories it might have, or it's really interesting because I think there is something in the relational, and kind of to weave in perhaps a slightly unexpected reference here for the kind of conversation we're having around business and AI, but thinkers who talk about interbeing, like Thich Nhat Hanh, who talk about our relationship to all that exists, and that AI, even though I would argue it's not sentient yet, and we can debate what that is semantically, it's still something which elicits a response. It gives some information. And like you were saying with your husband, with your partner, that within that response time, it calls upon you to bring something of your own into that interaction. So you end up learning about yourself. And on the darker side, it can be like the machine manipulating the user to give it prompts that then it can read better, which my partner did this morning. He's like, well, I put this in, I was trying to find a plot for a book. And then in the end, I got the best answer when I used some of the language that ChatGPT had given me to ask it back. So it's kind of this honing. But also we do that in relationship, right? The best interactions often, not always, are when the person gets us and they're able to mirror but not replicate word per word the kind of sentiment that we're trying to express, the lexicon, whatever.
No, and I love that what you're saying, because what it's doing is many times when you have to write or you have to do something solo, you don't have a thought partner. And and if I go to my partner and I want to talk about something, first I have to give him a whole history of what I'm talking about, right? And then you're frustrated about it because you have like 5 minutes to make this answer, and you're like, I got to give you all the history and all the other stuff that goes with it. And instead, this actually is an opportunity to really have that kind of back and forth, because you can ask it more questions over and over again and hone it together. You get better at your questions. They get better at the answers. The answers invoke another question to be asked, and it becomes a good dialogue that enhances the thing. So that's why I've enjoyed it. I've embraced it. But again, it's not the be all end all. And I do agree, it's still riddled with a lot of challenges, biases, and things that are from an ethical standpoint are still a little bit murky. But if you know that and you're going eyes wide open, you can leverage it in the right way.
Fascinating. I mean, there's so much to talk about. We're kind of coming towards the end of the conversation, but I do want to ask a couple more questions before we close this bit. Sure. And that's, are there any practices that have been invaluable to you in the past turmoil of the last, actually it's not even 18 months, it's like pre-COVID, since 2019 or further?
Any practices that have been valuable to me? So I go back to the practice of getting feedback and also giving it and being direct about it. It's something that I hit in my career moment where I didn't get the job I was ready for. When I was expecting it, I didn't get it, or I was told I wasn't going to get it. And I learned through that process that people felt they couldn't give me feedback. And I probably was incredibly defensive. I was probably very rude. I'm sure I why would somebody give me feedback back then? But it was a great wake-up call to realize that feedback is a gift. And regardless of how it's given, regardless if it's done in the right way, if the words are used in that you want to hear or not, somebody who is willing to give you that honest and open feedback, and for you to ask and be open to it, is a great practice. It's funny because I've learned, being in a learning culture, always pushing feedback now because, it was one of those things that held me back in the past, that it's really helped me to be much more resilient. But I put into practice in many different ways. So I'll give you a couple things I've done. Sometimes I'll go to my son and I'll say, what sucks about me?
Wow.
And he'll look at me.
How many moms do that?
And he'll say to me, Mom, nothing. Of course, because he's afraid of what the outcome is going to be. And I'm like, no, seriously, what sucks about me? And he'll be honest with me and say, Mom, sometimes you're too helpful,
Huh.
but I'll tell you what's good about you being helpful. If I'm in a tornado or in the middle of a hurricane in Louisiana, which happened
Oh,
for
bless
him,
him.
and I need to
Wow.
get home, there's no chance I'm calling anyone but you, because you're the most helpful person who's going to go and find a way to get me home, and you will get me home. But if I come to
Oh,
you and I want to talk to you about a problem I'm having, you're going to go into help mode, and
yeah.
you're going to want to fix the problem. And
Yeah.
sometimes I just don't want you to.
Yeah.
I want to
I
do
hear
it
that.
myself. So
Oh,
I would say those are ways to do it. Now, another funny anecdote about my family is I've gotten into feedback and evaluating my own work that even when I
yeah.
cook dinner now, my family doesn't even start eating. They keep the forks down, and they're like, "Okay, Mom, you're going to give us the pros and cons of your steak tonight
Oh,
and your
how
potatoes,"
funny.
and I'll be like, "Well, this feels a little too salty. I wish I made it a little bit more of this." And so it bleeds into everything, but it's to me, feedback and being self-reflective is a practice I live and breathe.
That's amazing. It's so interesting because then it becomes like literally it becomes a way of life, a way of just kind of relating to folks. And I think it also, and maybe this kind of connects to your optimism and that learning stance, it also somehow takes out the sting, because if you get good at receiving feedback, there's also, and you mentioned this earlier, and I thought it was very interesting, the kind of language that's used, because there are some ways that people could say things to me that I will bristle if I hear them. And yet what it's pointing towards could be really important for me to hear. And so I think it's reducing our allergy or bristling towards things which are unpalatable, to be able to really assess them and be like, ah, actually, and pointing back again towards that resilience, to be able to assess something without so much of the emotional friction that you're going to miss it because you're feeling a certain way, you don't want to hear it.
Absolutely.
Fascinating. Yeah.
Well, and I think partly we have to remember the person who's giving you the feedback is taking a risk in
Yeah.
doing it, and sometimes they can't find the right words. Maybe English isn't a first language for them,
Mm.
or
Mm.
maybe they're nervous about doing it. They're afraid
Yeah.
of hurting your feelings. They're afraid of disappointing you. So when you react to the words and you're not listening to the content, you're missing the essence of it, and you're also shutting them down from being able to do it and give it to you again, or to
Yeah.
take the risk again.
So it's also about that taking the risk together and being
Mm-hmm.
generous in one's assumptions about the other person.
100%.
Um, yeah. So I always feel like this is a bit of a bookend question to the first one, which is quite a big one. This is also a big one. And that's, how do you orient yourself towards life and beauty on dark days?
Wow. I'm sure most people would say exercise,
Ah,
or like,
interesting.
or maybe a sport like pickleball, which I enjoy and love to play. But for me, I think it's really around music. I love the arts, and I
Ah,
find, especially with music, when I'm sad, putting on a sad song helps me get the cry
oh,
out. Or if I need a motivating song before I'm going to do a podcast, or or I'm going to walk into a tough meeting or a difficult
mm,
conversation, or have to deal with a situation at home, putting on a pumped up music song usually gets me in that mood. And the thing about music is it brings up memories too for us. And I
mm,
love that because it grounds me in a way where it says, don't sweat the small stuff. Think about the big picture, and think about those moments. So it helps quiet my thoughts, helps focus me. And I really just love the creative process. And I don't know if you've listened to Song Exploder. It's
mm,
a podcast, and it's also, they have a couple Netflix sessions on it too. And it really takes a song and breaks it down into its parts, and
mm,
how the artist actually thought about that song and how they created it. And those kind of things ground me into the creative process that I love. So on dark
mm.
days, I do those things.
That sounds amazing. It's funny because I actually don't. I mean, I do listen to. It's been a while since I listened to music. When I get, because I go through phases of being very kind of, especially for podcasts, of immersing myself in some of the podcasts around those themes, and I forget actually that sometimes the best thinking comes from giving the mind a break from all the words and just being able to sail into that space. Um, so we're coming to the end of this interview, and for the last question, if people want to find out more about you, and we've only just scratched the surface, but to find out more about you and indeed about Pagaya, what are the best places to find you?
Well, for Pagaya, it's pagaya.com. For me, definitely is LinkedIn. I have a number of articles and podcasts that are all posted there talking about some of the different practices and things that we're doing at Pagaya, but also things that I think will help change the way people strategy is in the future. So happy for people to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I respond to most everything that comes my way.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That was really fun.
Thank you. It was fun. I appreciate being here today.